Our next keynote speaker will be Mr. Ahmed Alnaouq. Mr. Ahmed, he's the founder of We Are Not Numbers. He has a master's degree in international journalism from Leeds University, and he's also the co-founder of Across the Wall, a media project that tells the stories from Gaza in Hebrew, serves as advocacy and outreach officer for the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor. Ahmed's writing has been published by several writers, several platforms in the Middle East, including, not to mention, the Gulf News, the New Arab, and the other websites as well. Mr. Alnaouq will now present on family loss, genocide, and the Western complicity. Please welcome him.
Thank you very much. I believe everyone is now tired after this long day, so I will be very short, and I will try not to be boring. And I understand that there were a lot of presentations that were very elaborative and research, so it can be very exhausting for our minds. So allow me to tell you a little bit about myself, since I need to talk about the loss of my family. My name is Ahmed Alnaouq, and I grew up in Gaza, like many other Palestinians here. And as Muhammad said, we in Gaza, we count our age by how many wars we survived. So I think I am more than 3 wars old and 10 aggressions. So I grew up in Gaza, and I lived all my life in Gaza. During my time in Gaza, I lived through many wars and the siege, the collective punishment that Israel waged against the people in Gaza. In some of these wars, in the war in 2014, I lost my first family member, my brother Ayman. In 2020, Israel killed my mother as well, but indirectly, because when you live under siege, under blockade, sometimes, or most of the times, you are not allowed to travel. So if you need treatment, then you will need a permit from Israel, and Israel did not give my mother the permit she needs, so she died of cancer. But all of that was not comparable to what happened to my family in this war, in this genocide in 2023. Because on the 22nd of October, when my family were sleeping in their home, Israel dropped a bomb on my home in Gaza, killing nearly every single member of my family. They killed my father, who's 75 years old, my 2 brothers, my 3 sisters, and all of their children, 14 kids. 14 kids were killed in my home, who are all under the age of 13. Some of them were 1 year old, some of them were 2 or 3 or 5-year-old kids. So I'm talking about my father, my brother Muhammad, and his children, my sister Wala and her 4 children, my sister Ala and her 5 children, my sister Aya and her 3 children, which means like all of their children were killed. And I thought, this is the biggest milestone of my life. I lost all of my family. But then I realized that this is not only me. There are thousands and thousands of other families in Gaza. There is also, you issued arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu, and Yoav Gallant. France, which is a signatory to the ICC, a member of the ICC, they said Israel, the Prime Minister of Netanyahu, has immunity. So even after arrest warrants were issued, they said Prime Minister Netanyahu has immunity. So they are not willing to arrest Netanyahu according to their obligations of the international law. They're not doing that. And some people might argue, maybe the West or the Western countries are complicit in these war crimes and participating in these war crimes without knowledge or prior knowledge from. And that's absolutely false. These world leaders know exactly what's happening in Gaza. They know exactly that Israel is waging war crimes against the Palestinian people. They know exactly that Israel is carrying out a genocide against the Palestinian people, but they're still supporting Israel nonetheless. And I'll give you some examples. The Prime Minister, the Dutch Prime Minister, made a statement. He said to he told his advisors, and I'm quoting him, what can I say in order to make Israel look as if they don't commit war crimes? So they know that Israel is committing war crimes, but they want to invent a way in which they can tell the world that Israel is not committing war crimes. The UK also received advisory opinion, and they refused to make that public because that advisory opinion said that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza. And the same thing for the US aid, which released reports to Biden telling him that Israel is impeding the humanitarian aid to Gaza and committing war crimes. But Biden pretended that he doesn't know about it. But we also, a big part of this complicity and participation in the genocide is the Western media bias. And the Western media cannot be understood in isolation from the governments and the foreign policy of these governments of the West, because the Western media is a translation. It is a translation of the Western foreign policy to the Middle East. So whatever the British or the American foreign policy is towards a country, the Western media will just follow suit. And that's why we saw in the Western media how the Palestinians are always interrogated. After I lost my family in Gaza, I was invited to speak to the media, but I was also interrogated in the mainstream media. They would ask me about Hamas, if Hamas is a terror organization or not. Can you imagine? Just days after I lost my family, all my family members, I was invited to the TV stations to be interrogated. And do you know why they ask us to condemn Hamas or to say Hamas is a terror organization or not? Because they want to test our humanity. Because they will always want to question us. Because we Palestinians, on our own, we are not equal, they think. We are inferior to the Israelis. So if an Israeli person lost all of his family members, do you think they will ever ask him to condemn the Israeli army war crimes in Gaza? Of course not. It is because they always look down at us Palestinians. They lie about the Palestinian people. They disseminate misinformation about what's actually happening in Gaza. How many times did you hear about the 40 beheaded babies? And I always bring this example because it tells you a lot how the mainstream media works. If an Israeli said any lie, whatever lie he said, they would pick it up. They would disseminate this information as if it is fact. But when we Palestinians tell our narrative, our stories, we would always be questioned. And that's why when I lost my family, some of the mainstream media came to write about me. And they spent weeks and weeks investigating my story, asking me to give all the names of my family members, their ages. And they also wanted to see their names in the Ministry of Health list of the martyrs who were killed in Gaza. And they were investigating and asking for pictures. And where does my family house locate? And they want me to show them on the map, investigating. But when the same organization wrote about the 40 beheaded babies, they just published that without any due diligence, without any investigation. And that tells you that the mainstream media is really interested in the misreporting on Palestine. So why is this all happening? Why is the mainstream media is biased? Why the Western world is actually participating in the genocide in Gaza? There are many reasons, but one of them, and the most important reason, I think, it's because they think of Israel as their colonial project in the Middle East. They think that they are very linked, very connected to Israel because it is them and they are Israel, and they cannot separate themselves from Israel because Israel, according to one of the American generals, he said, Israel is the unsinkable ship of the US military. So it is their weapon in the Middle East. But another thing, I was in a meeting with one of the European leaders a few weeks ago, and I asked him about what he thinks. And he told me, listen, Ahmed, I know that Israel is committing war crimes. I know Netanyahu is a war criminal, but we have a problem with the Islamists, and we think of him as Israel as a shield between us and those Muslims. So there is a huge part of the problem is racism, that they think of us Muslims as a problem to the West, a problem to the Western values, and this has to change. And because of that, because Israel is a project of the colonial of a colony of the West, and because of the racism and the sheer racism that the West has against us, I believe that this war between Israel and Palestine is not actually a war between Israel and Palestine. This is not a clash between us Palestinians and the Israelis, or Muslims or Jews. This is a war between the oppressed, the colonized, and the colonization and the oppression. This is a war between just and justice and injustice and thieves and thuggery. And Palestine represents the light, and Israel represents darkness. And this is a war between all of us. This is a war of all of us between darkness and evil. And that's why we all should work together in order to defeat this darkness so that light can prevail. Thank you very much.